Welcome to the Fabulous Fifties and Beyond. I'm Jim Pollard with my wife Jeanetta, and today we're going to be talking about Generations Adult Day Services. This is a coming thing in the time in which we lived, and you stay tuned and we'll be right back.
And he'd say, go with what you got. Start from where you are. Give it your best shot. Keep reaching for that star. Get in the race, keep your own pace, keep moving and never stop. Just go, go with what you got.
I'm Jim Pollard, your co-host with my wife Jeanetta, and today we have as our guest Michelle Hawkins, and Michelle is Executive Director of Generations Adult Day Services. Did I pronounce that right?
You did.
Okay. Tell us what Adult Day Services is.
Generations is a program open Monday through Friday to provide family members and their loved ones that they care for with a day of socialization coupled with nursing care, nutrition services, medication services, just a way for them to have a socialization during their day while providing the caregiver with respite, much needed respite.
Well, this is a way too that they can socialize with people their own age.
Absolutely.
And sometimes they get really, really lonely.
They do.
Especially if everybody in the family works.
Mm-hmm. And what we say, we try to make it different. Generations is different. Family members will allow their loved one not because they don't care, but because it's harder for them to communicate or connect with someone who, say, has Alzheimer's disease or dementia-related disorder, because they have to initiate the conversations more than they used to, have to do a lot of maybe correcting, or feel like they have to do a lot of correcting in the conversation instead of just enjoying the conversation as it comes. A lot of times the one with Alzheimer's disease or dementia, while they're at home, they will watch television and frequently fall asleep and spend much of their day watching TV or going to sleep, maybe becoming bored, begin to wander and want to leave their home, then maybe get lost and have a difficulty finding their way back home. So
this is the same as taking a child to a child care center. Am I right?
Basically? Well, it is very much the same premise. Person with a child who goes to a child care center, we compare that with saying it's difficult for a parent to drop their child off at a child care center, because oftentimes, especially in the beginning, a child won't want to stay. It's something new, something they don't really know much about. It's unfamiliar, and they may cry for their loved one, for their parent. And in the same way, it's very similar with adult daycare in the beginning, because the parent who has lived their life productively and independently for years and years now has to engage with people they know nothing about, go to a facility, a setting that they've never seen before, and they're not the ones always making the decisions like they used to make the decisions before. So it's very hard for the caregivers, which now are the children or grandchildren, who are making those decisions for their parent or grandparent, and maybe their grandparent or parent doesn't want to stay. And if they were just to give them an opportunity to get to know and to get comfortable, then they would recognize, much like children, they would begin to be very comfortable in the situation that they're in the facility, and make friends, and then it would just become commonplace for them.
And they don't like change.
No, none of us do.
but as you get older, it gets worse.
Correct.
Mother used to say she wanted to go home. Well, she would be home, but she would be thinking about a house they lived in most of their lives, somewhere else.
And they say, from what the Alzheimer's Association has taught us, many times home is really not a place. It is a feeling, something that is familiar to them, because in the home that they live in right now, say they've lived there for years and years, it's just not something they're familiar with, and they're still looking for that familiarity.
In your facility there, do you have any classes for the caregivers?
Actually, the Alzheimer's Association, we work fairly closely with them and the Graves County Alzheimer's Association support group. And there are many classes that are provided through the Alzheimer's Association in the local areas. And we encourage our family members to attend those classes. Those classes are free, and many times they even provide snacks. Some cases they provide lunch, but it definitely is a necessity for caregivers to take the time. They don't have much time. Most of them work outside of the home, but to take the time to learn more, become educated more on the disease that they are dealing with. You know, their mother and father or grandparent or whoever the situation is, they are still the same person they have always known, but they just have to relate differently. Their brains, with Alzheimer's disease, your brains are changing with the disease. Areas in the brain that was once full and filled with information have shrunk or deteriorating, and they're no longer able to reason or function the way they once did, but they still have all that love in their heart, and they still want to be loved and want to give love, but it's just very difficult for a caregiver to understand how to relate to the person once they have the disease. So that's one way that it would help the caregiver, is if they took those classes in communication, which is most important, but also with some of the behaviors that are associated with Alzheimer's disease and dementia, to help them to cope with those behaviors.
Well, the reason I asked that question is because I picked up on something you said when you were talking earlier, in that trying to correct, and from having dealt with her mother and others, you don't correct them. You know,
No.
let them live in their world. You know, I mean, that's the way I feel about it. But so many caregivers or family members, well, no, mother, that's not the way it was. Well, it is in their mind the way it was, and trying to change them is not helping them any. In fact, sometimes I think it's confusing them more by doing that.
You're right, and it also causes them to become a little angry because they are the parent, and they, you know, it's embarrassing. You're showing them that they're not exactly remembering things correctly when they believe they're remembering them correctly, and they don't want their children or grandchildren telling them that they're wrong. And you know, we always want to encourage the person with Alzheimer's disease, and if you do correct someone with Alzheimer's disease, it's just counterproductive. It just causes them to be agitated, and we always do say to live in their world.
I just think my mother, before she died, she was in a nursing home, not long, but maybe a few months. And she told me one day that Edeline came to visit her. That was her niece. Well, Edeline had been dead for a long time. But I said, if she thinks her niece is coming to visit her, let her think that, because it's, you know, in a way it can be a good thing for them.
Many people have different ways of looking at this. Some people, when it comes to loved ones who have passed on, and the person with the Alzheimer's disease or dementia may say, well, when is mother coming?
Right.
Or my husband, who has been dead for many years, they're coming home from work, or I've got to go see them. Some people say, well, it's best to be always honest and truthful and tell them that they're gone. And in our situation, in my experience, and I can't substitute my judgment for someone else's, but in my experience, it just causes them to relive that mourning period all over again. And if they can be happy and smile and think good thoughts of that person, what's the harm in that? And many times if a person doesn't want to tell them or feels maybe that they should tell them that, oh, mom has been dead, grandma has been dead for many, many years, you know, you can redirect. You can say, well, tell me about grandma, or, you know, I remember grandma used to make those cookies, and then eventually get on to another subject if it would make the caregiver more comfortable with, you know, not necessarily telling them the truth. So.
Well, I know sometimes they really get on your nerves, because they'll repeat something, you know, 3 or 4 times, you know, but, and we know that they can't help it. But it's still, sometimes it's frustrating.
Yes, it is.
I know it is, especially to the people who have them in their homes, you know.
It is, because when they are in the home, they become the shadow. and they will follow the person. If they're not sleeping or watching television, they don't want their caregiver out of the room. They want to be with them at all times, and they become their shadow. And oftentimes a caregiver can't even go to the restroom without them wanting to be with them. And we've heard stories where they will shut the door and lock the door just for a few minutes to be in the bathroom alone, and their loved one is knocking on the door the whole time, let me in, what are you doing in there? And it does become very, very frustrating, which is why we are here. We are an outlet, and we give the caregiver is always the very best caregiver. They are the ones who gives the very best ultimate care, always. But there are organizations out there like Adult Day Services, in-home services, different agencies who can help and give them a break. They can come to Generations if the caregiver just needs to be alone at home for a while, to sit down and read the paper or drink a cup of coffee without being bothered, if you will. And because that's how the caregiver begins to feel. They don't have any time for themselves anymore. Or if they need to go to the doctor without having to care for their loved one while they're being cared for. And unfortunately, many times caregivers forget to care about themselves.
Yeah, I was going to say that seems to be the statistics are that in a lot of cases the caregiver dies before the person they're giving care for because they don't take care of themselves.
Yes, and we have talked to many caregivers and try to encourage them to use our services just to let people help. And what we say is, don't rob someone of the blessing, because maybe you have prayed for some help and someone offers their help for you, and you choose not to use that help because you think you have to do it by yourself. Like you owe that to the person you're caring for to do it for yourself, but in turn you're causing yourself to feel so much stress and your body to be so stressed, and eventually it will catch up with you.
I was thinking back, I remember hearing a doctor say one time, he was talking about just to get away, just to be at home alone. This doctor was saying that whenever he took a vacation, he had to tell his staff to tell the people who were calling in that he was at a convention to learn more, because some of his patients didn't think the doctor was supposed to take a vacation. He was supposed to be there all the time.
Be there for them,
And I guess it kind of gets that way sometimes on caregiving also, that they have to really have a reason or another reason other than just being alone or being out of way. Well, how long have y'all been in Mayfield now?
5 years. Actually, October 17th, we will be celebrating our 5th year anniversary. And this year, we were given an award from the state of Kentucky, the Adult Daycare of the Year award.
Wow. That is very nice.
Yes, we were very, very happy, very fortunate, very blessed to receive that award.
So 5 years.
Yes.
Wow. That is quite a while. And we've got it on the board so that the people can see where you are, but you go ahead and tell us where you are and what your phone number is.
Okay, we are located at 225 West Water Street in Mayfield. We are close to Stone's Pharmacy, close to the post office, Eloise Fuller apartment buildings. I'm trying to think of a few places that people would recognize. And our phone number is, of course, area code 270-247-1311. And we are open Monday through Friday, 7:30 a.m. until 5:30 p.m. And we are a licensed adult day health care facility, licensed with the state of Kentucky.
Okay.
Now, do you provide any transportation for them?
We do some transportation. We are in the process of trying to get a van, writing a grant, and to get a van so we can provide more transportation. Of course, if a person uses the Medicaid waiver program, which Medicaid waiver will pay for adult daycare, if they are eligible for adult daycare services, then transportation is provided by that program. And there is some transportation through the Graves County Senior Center. They do have a van, but it is a very limited time span that they run the van, and they don't have handicapped accessible vans at this time. They have in the past, but at this time right now they don't have that. So a person would have to be ambulatory without the use of a wheelchair to be able to use that. And I have on many occasions picked them up in my personal vehicle vehicle and taking them back home. So I try to not do that as much, simply because I need to be there at the facility a lot, and not so much on the road transporting. But if a family member is in a bind and they need me, I'm going to be there.
Very good.
That would be just like for a temporary
Yes.
thing. Yeah.
Yes.
All right, we're going to take a break, and we'll be back, and you stay tuned, and we'll be right back, and we'll be talking more about adult day services.
We didn't have much to give then. So when they showed up, firing them mean looks around the place and staring us down on prices, well, I was angry. Didn't seem to bother my father, though. He had me load another bushel of apples in their trunk. I learned later on that this family was in need.
The greatest gift we give, it's in our heart, what we believe, the way we live.
Caring for others. Pass it on.
Welcome back. I'm Jim Pollard, co-host with my wife Jeanetta, and our guest today is Michelle Hawkins. And Michelle is Executive Director of Generations Adult Day Services. We're learning a lot about adult day services here, and we're going to learn some more in this half also. And we're glad that you're with us today. And Michelle, we're glad to have you. Let's talk about some of the things that we were actually talking about before we went on the air, about some of the things that you have to watch for. And we know that being the caregiver can get very stressful at times, and a lot of times get involved in doing things that you just don't know whether you're doing right or not.
We tell the caregivers, everything that has happened from this point backwards, you have to let it go. You have done the very best that you possibly can do. Let it go. From this point forward, once you've been educated in learning how to communicate with your loved one, you can make the changes that you need to make. Even if you mess up, it's okay. You may get frustrated and say, you've asked me that question 12 times. Okay, let it go. Try to do better the next time. If you have to walk out of the room just for a few minutes to just collect your thoughts, it's okay. I think a lot of times caregivers are just so stressed because of their caregiving duties and they don't recognize that they're stressed. And sometimes it comes to that point before they realize they really need help.
Also, I mean, you correct me if I'm wrong, but isn't the memory span of the one you're giving care to short? You may walk out of the room, or you might say something, and you might carry that burden, and they forgot about it a long time ago.
Right, they have. And sometimes, of course, you've heard the term sundowning.
Right.
And we have learned that sundowning is basically a series of frustrations throughout the day, the person who has Alzheimer's disease, because maybe they have been corrected all day long or frustrated by, whatever situation may occur. They can't do something that they used to do, want to go outside, and their family says, no, you're not going outside, or whatever the situation is. By the end of the day, they're frustrated. And so then they cannot cope like we can cope with frustrations. Sometimes we have very difficult times coping with frustrations.
Right. Yes, we do.
But they have the inability to cope with those frustrations. So then you see behaviors, if you will, occur late day because of all of those series of frustrations throughout their day. And caregivers, in fact, we had one caregiver to tell us that she was going to commit suicide.
Ooh.
She was on the verge of committing suicide and needed help and did not know where to go. And then she found us. And her family member was with us for many, many years before she could no longer take care of him, and she did have to put him in the nursing home. But she did the very best that she could while she had him there. We had another family member to say that all she could do was just cry. She would hide in a room, shut the door, and cry because she just needed to be away for just a little while. They didn't recognize how stressed they were until it got to the point where could have been too late.
Well, how many years has adult daycares been because I don't remember it. You know.
Well, back in 1990, I started as a senior in high school. I graduated from Lone Oak High School in 1990, and that year I started volunteering at, which was at the time, Daybreak with Lourdes Hospital, and then was hired on and was there for almost 10 years. And currently now the name of that location is Active Day Services. It is in Paducah. And but adult daycare has been around a while. I don't know when it actually started, but I can tell you that adult daycare is something that people, it's one of the best kept secrets, I guess. People don't realize it's there. We need to educate more the public, and referring agencies, doctors' offices, hospital social workers, and so forth, to let them know, hairdressers, because oftentimes at the beauty shop, family members will talk about their troubles, and if beauticians will know about places that they can send their clients for help, that would help. So, you know, we just need to educate the public better about the resources that are available for the caregivers.
Well, that's part of what has been our goal here on our program, is to let the public know the services that are available. We've learned a lot over the years doing this program about services that are available that we didn't know anything about. And as a result of that, we've been able to tell others about them and share with them on our program the different services that are out there that are available. And a lot of them are free. And that's the thing about it.
Sure, and thankfully people like you know, you do get the word out, and you are a wonderful marketing tool for these agencies. We are a nonprofit agency, Generations is, so our marketing efforts are a lot of door-to-door walking and handing out brochures and such, and we're very thankful to have a program like this where we can tell about our expertise.
Thank you. By the way, for our viewing audience, we need to let them know that our program is streamed online now, so it can be seen anywhere. So if they have somebody even in another city, another state, or somewhere that's interested in learning things about what we talk about and checking out services in their town, we are
Thanks for old people.
Yeah. But they can go to Paducah2.org, and that's the Paducah, the number 2.org, and find out a listing of our shows and when they're shown and everything, and actually can watch this show anytime they want to, or any of the others that we've had, which is good for people like you also, that you can tell people in other areas how they can see your show.
Yes, and thank you.
Yeah.
I threw in that about old people because you know, you go to the doctor and he tells you have this, and you go home and you look it up on the internet. It's primarily for among elderly people, you know.
Yeah,
so
it's like a lot of stuff we look up. It's like, well, you can expect it if you're older, you know.
And it's really scary, some of the things you look up online.
It is, and some of it's, you know.
Yeah, you have to kind of take it with a grain of salt.
Yeah, you do.
Yeah,
you do.
But when I broke my hip, she started checking out the statistics on that, and they weren't good, you know. But and it was interesting that they said that's what Eddie Fisher died of, was complications of hip replacement surgery. And but mine did well. I do good. I heal quick, and I'm glad. But go ahead.
We talked about money off camera some, about, you know, my mother didn't have a lot of money, but she had, you know, enough to take care of her and all, and we thought we could hire somebody for $150. They would have stayed for $150 a week, and we didn't think that she would think that was too much money, but she did think it was too much money. And then she got to where she didn't know. Fortunately, she had put my sister's name on her checking account, so we could, you know, take care of her money. And but she would always say, if you said anything, let's do this or let's do that or something, it cost too much. She didn't have any money. And my sister took her checkbook to her one day and showed her. She said, "Mother, here it is, $3,000 something. This is just in your checking account. That is not mine. I don't know why you would show that." Tell me that. So, but I know that there are people who, and you hear it on the news, that they take advantage of.
They do, unfortunately, and we have experienced that at Generations as well. Unfortunately, we do have to work with the Adult Protective Services when we have a family member to bring their loved one in, and we find that there are possibly some neglect or some exploitation financially or abuse that is going on in the home. And we try desperately to work with the family members to prevent those things from happening, but sometimes they still do happen. And unfortunately, it doesn't always start with a person wanting to be devious or take their mother's funds. Sometimes it starts out very innocently. Say an electric bill is due and the caregiver has spent a lot of their money on their mother or their father. However, the situation presents itself and their electric bill is due and they don't have the money to pay it, so they borrow some money from their mom, and then the next time there's another bill due that they can't pay, so they borrow some more money from their mom, and eventually, unfortunately, at times it comes to the point where the whole check is being spent by the caregiver on things that is not related to the care of their loved one. And the same way with abuse. Sometimes it starts out with just getting ready for work and you're really late and your mom or dad's not getting dressed as quickly as you need them to get dressed, because we can't expect them to live in our time, we have to live in their time. And it may start out with just a little bit of too tight of a squeeze on their hand, or maybe a little bit of a shove to get out the door, and sometimes it just escalates to the point where it's considered abuse. So that's where we want to be, that helping hand to family members to let you know that if it gets to the point where you think you may harm your loved one or exploit your loved one, we are a ministry. I consider Generations our ministry, and we care and love for the people we take care of, plus their families. We want to be there for them. If they get to that point where they think they may step over the boundaries, we'll be there for them. Now, if there has been the abuse or the neglect or the exploitation, and it's to the point where it has to be reported, because we are mandated to report that. I'm not saying that that we would not report it, but I am saying that you do have an outlet with us.
Well, Michelle, we appreciate you being with us today, and it's Generations Adult Services, and they're located in Mayfield, Kentucky. We're out of time. That's yeah, but that's a good thing. By the way, we will have Generations address, telephone number, Michelle's name listed on our website. Our website is thefabulousfifties.org and .net. I'm sorry, thefabulousfifties.net, and we will have it listed on our website there, so you can find out more information if you'd like to. But Michelle, thank you again for being with us today. And it's been a very informative program, which is what we really like, the ones that inform our public out there what's going on. And we encourage you to be with us again next week. We'll have another new show for you. We'll be discussing some of the things that are going on in the area or something that you need to know about. But it's our mission that we can inform you and inspire you and motivate you to do things. So always remember now, use it or lose it.
Can't see as well as I used to, can't run as far or as fast. Sometimes I think that the old me is becoming exactly that. But when I start thinking of all I don't have,